You're watching AM Agenda. On our political panel this morning, Labor MP Ed Husic and Liberal MP Alex Hawke. Good morning to both of you, gentlemen.
Morning.
I want to start, Ed Husic, with these claims splashed across the front of the Australian newspaper about an alleged envelope that was deposited into Julia Gillard's bank account back in 1996. Yes, these are old allegations, but this is the first time we've heard of them today. So should Julia Gillard answer some questions on this?
Well, allegations are one thing, substantiating them's another. We've had a press conference where the Prime Minister has comprehensively answered a broad range of questions until they were exhausted about this issue, and I think most people believe that unless there's any substance, that the caravan's moved on as it should.
But there is documentary evidence, according to the report in the Australian newspaper today, a diary going back to that time that alleges that this is something that happened.
Well, a claim made in a diary that still will require substantiation. As I come back to my earlier point, David, claims are one thing, substantiation's another, and really, unless there's any proof, you have to go back to the PM's, very comprehensive press conference back in August.
But isn't it a very bad look to have an envelope allegedly full of cash without an explanation for that from the Prime Minister?
Well, again, people will speculate, people will make all sorts of claims, but the test is proof. So, people ultimately will be required to meet that standard, and it's a right standard to have to meet.
Alex Hawke, Julia Gillard did very clearly state over a very long news conference here at Parliament House that she had done absolutely nothing wrong. Why is that not good enough?
Well, when you've got claims of this nature about the Prime Minister, the only way, as Ed says, to substantiate these claims is for the Prime Minister to answer questions on this matter. We've asked questions in Parliament, which she's declined to answer, and if you go to the Australian newspaper today, you'll see they've printed a series of questions they have put to the Prime Minister that she has declined to answer. And she did not answer these new matters in her press conference. Now, if you go to this report today, what you'll see is, as you point out, a contemporaneous account of events that happened surrounding this matter. And that's from Mr Campbell, who is currently a Fair Work Commissioner, who was a Joint Secretary of the AWU at the time. These are credible reports, but the questions the Australian has put and the opposition has put in Parliament have not been answered by the Prime Minister, and we're saying the Prime Minister must answer questions about this matter.
OK, well, moving on. Yesterday, Tony Abbott caused controversy with comments that he made about one of his colleagues, the first Indigenous MP to enter the lower house, Ken Wyatt. Let's hear what he said first.
Now, I am very proud that the first Indigenous member of the House of Representatives is Ken Wyatt, who entered the Parliament for the Liberal National Party, for our coalition. I think it would be terrific if, as well as having an urban Aboriginal in our Parliament, we had an Aboriginal person from Central Australia, an authentic representative of the ancient cultures of Central Australia in the Parliament.
Ken Wyatt's nephew is pretty upset about this. Alex Hawke, is Tony Abbott there saying that Ken Wyatt is not an authentic Aboriginal?
Well, of course he isn't, David, and I mean, I'm glad you played that entire sequence of speech because I saw it yesterday, and I've got to say, while the language may have been a tiny bit clunky, Ken Wyatt's nephew is a member of the Labor Party, and what Tony Abbott is clearly saying here is that he wants more Indigenous Australians in our federal parliament. Now, I don't believe anybody can find fault with that, and he's talking about what is, while it is a little clunky, it's a simple thing to say that local representatives are best. Local people from the Northern Territory will best represent the culture of the Northern Territory itself, where a lot of Indigenous Australians are located. It's a very simple thing, it's a good thing he is doing, and I find it really ridiculous that people are trying to take issue with the fact that the opposition leader in Australia is calling on more Indigenous Australians to enter the federal parliament.
You say that the language is clunky. It seems that there's been a little bit of cleaning up going on after Mr Abbott's comments in greater number of late. Do you think it's time he takes a break, as other senior Liberals have suggested he do?
Not at all. I think in today's world, where you've got 24/7 media coverage, any single comment you can try and grab a section of it, and that's what some papers did yesterday to say that he was attacking Ken White. He's clearly saying put more Indigenous people into the federal parliament. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is a worthy and righteous thing to be doing.
So you don't think he's tired at the moment? He doesn't need a break over summer?
Well, I don't think... I'm sure we all need a break over summer. I mean, we need a break over Christmas and New Year to spend with our families and friends, but I know Ed needs a break and I know I need a break, so I don't think he's unusual. He's human like everybody else.
Ed Husic, what do you make of those comments from Tony Abbott yesterday?
Tony Abbott is gone as the opposition leader. He has displayed over the last few weeks gaffe after gaffe after gaffe, and this is not about... Everyone shares the absolutely terrific ambition, and we should have more people from Indigenous Australia in our nation's parliament. But what he said yesterday was a gaffe, pure and simple. He keeps making these stuff-ups. Liberals know that he is not... that he's repelling Liberal voters now, which is the threshold they've now passed. Tony Abbott is gone, and he will keep making these gaffes, and if they don't change him, he'll just keep going on and making these stupid statements.
David, look, that's just hysterical, I've got to say. I mean, the Prime Minister is not calling for more Indigenous people to enter the federal parliament. It's Tony Abbott.
It's not what he
and that's
said.
because he's a very authentic
Alex, it's not what he said.
representative of Indigenous Australians.
Don't try and stitch this into something else that ain't so. It's clear what he said yesterday.
It is clear.
And
it's
the
very
thing
clear.
is, Ken Wyatt is a total gent. Like, he will do the right thing, and he will say the right thing publicly. And just because his nephew is a member of the Labor Party does not make it in any way, shape or form that you can just dismiss the hurt that's been caused by the statement.
I think we'll listen to Ken on that one.
Gentlemen.
Sure.
I want to leave that topic there. I want to move on. Get your thoughts on the Royal Commission that was announced a couple of days ago by the Prime Minister. Firstly, there seems to be a debate now on whether priests should be forced to divulge any information about child sexual abuse that they receive in confessionals. I want to get both your thoughts on that. Alex Hawke, first of all.
Yeah, well, look, absolutely. I share Premier O'Farrell's view in this regard, that it is odd that a priest can confess to another priest an instance of paedophilia, and that does not have to be reported. I think the Royal Commission would do well to examine this exemption in the New South Wales Crimes Act that allows for just very certain occupations, including priests, not to divulge these very serious crimes. I think that's a worthwhile objective for the Royal Commission to look into, and personally I have, I think, grave concern, as I think a lot of people do in society, that there are exemptions under the Crimes Act in this regard.
Ed Husic, do you agree with that? And if so, where do we draw the line on what priests would have to divulge in terms of criminal activity?
I think the nature of the accusations, the type of things that people have said have occurred, are so heinous that there does need to be an ability to investigate claims, and if they are made, and while I certainly respect from the religious perspective the importance of the confessional process, if this is being used in some way to prevent those accusations from being properly investigated, then that's a serious issue. I think people who've been affected by this crime will also step forward, obviously under the umbrella and under the shield of the Royal Commission, to put claims forward, and I think that's important. I think also, if I can say, David, I think that having the Royal Commission set up in the way that it is, where it will cover institutions that have responsibility for the care of children, I think, I know you'd expect as a government MP for me to say that I welcome the way the inquiry is set up, but I think it is good that it's broadened out. I do feel for members of the Catholic faith who right now are obviously upset and anxious about the level of coverage, but it is important that these claims be investigated, and it doesn't detract from all the good work that people of the Catholic faith do, particularly out in Western Sydney within our communities. But we do need to get these matters investigated for the sake of victims and their families.
And just in 20 seconds or so, Alex Hawke, what do you make of what Ed alluded there to, the comments from Cardinal Pell that the media has distorted this issue in regards to the Catholic Church?
Well, look, I think Ed is right, and I wouldn't draw reflections on the Catholic faith or the Catholic Church. However, you know, I think all people, including all Catholics, would be keen to get to the bottom of this and to make sure this isn't occurring in such a fine institution like our religious institutions, like the Catholic Church. And it's very important that we're open about that, and I don't like this instinct to blame the media, ever. I think we've got to be open and transparent about hideous crimes like this.
Alex Hawke, Ed Husic, we're out of time. Thanks very much for your company. The news is coming up after this.